just a public, it's a public declaration. It's kind of a picture is really what it is. As Stephanie goes into the water and stays in the water. It's got to be 3 days. Jesus wouldn't have been And as we put her in the water, and as she comes out of the water, it's a beautiful picture of us identifying with what Jesus has done for us. It makes us whole, forgiven, and alive. It's His death and His resurrection that saves us and transforms us and changes us. And that's what baptism is. It doesn't save us. It just pictures what Christ has done to save us. So, Stephanie, share your anointing, and then you can baptize you.
Hello. A little over 2 weeks ago, on July 15th, I accepted Jesus into my life. I gave Him my life to be His and for Him to do what He wanted with me. It has been a hard 5 years for me and my family. I became mean to my family. I became a huge cutter, and then a little over 3 years ago, I stopped and started to get into wanting to know God more. That only lasted a few months. When we got a phone call on July 28th telling us that it was the last day my grandpa would be alive. My parents and I went to the hospital to be with him and my grandma. We watched my grandpa pass away from us. I now know that he is in heaven with God, and in time I will be with God and my grandpa for eternity. But back then I blamed God for taking someone so important away from me. That's when I started to cut again. I wanted nothing to do with God or Christians. I became very mean to my parents. It seemed like we were always fighting. When I started to go to public school, I made friends who weren't really my friends. They smoked cigarettes, and most of them smoked pot. I started to do both. I hid all of it from my parents the whole school year. I started to be friends with Frederick and Dylan, two Christian boys who are now my best friends. With them trusting in God and being there for me when I was going through a hard time, I became more interested in what they were saying about God. I didn't understand it myself, but I would listen more and more at church. I would ask my dad what he was going to teach on Sunday. Dylan and Derek got me to go to the Dunes Bible Camp, which was 3 weeks ago. At first, I didn't want to be there. There was something odd there. I couldn't understand it. We were singing a song called How Deep the Father's Love for Us. The line, "My sin is what held him there until it was accomplished," hit me for the first time. Thinking that God sent His one and only Son to die for our sin. And also, in order for me to be free, Jesus died on the cross. When I heard those lines in that song, I just got that feeling that God was calling my name. So I answered Him. Right then and there, I became a Christian. Since then, I have been a totally different person. I have stopped smoking and cutting, and I wear a different color than just black. God has done so much in the last 2 weeks. My close friends have all seen a huge change in me, and all the thanks goes to Jesus. For without Him, I would not be a new person. So I wrote this poem. It's called "The Change," and it's pretty much me comparing myself to my parents over the last few years. I was once lost in the world, unlike all my family who were lost in God. I was destroyed, they seemed perfect. I was mean, they were nice. I put God down, they brought Him up. I surrounded myself with potheads, they surrounded themselves with Christians. I destroyed my body, they kept their bodies as healthy as they could. I tried to do everything bad, they tried doing everything right. I ignored my Bible as much as I could, they read it every chance they got. I ran as far from God as I could, they walked right next to Him. I fought with them, they prayed for me. Now I am found, now I am better, now I am nice, now I bring God up. Now I surround myself with Christians, now I am keeping my body healthy. Now I try to do everything good, now I try and read my Bible. I now walk with God, for now I am a Christian myself.
Actually, maybe somebody else should pray. I don't think I can pray.
Father God, I thank you for Stephanie, and I thank you, Lord God, that your timing is perfect, that your authority is perfect, and that you have created in Stephanie an undivided heart, one that will seek after you. I pray, Lord, that you will protect her, especially when she goes back to public school, Lord God, that you would surround her with legion of angels, whether they be in pure form or they be in supernatural form. Lord God, I pray a mighty protection around her. And that, Lord, as I sit here, I can hear the rejoicing in heaven. Dave mentioned her grandparents, and I think of like Jerry. And if we all sit very quietly, I think that we can hear the rejoicing that goes on when one sinner repents and is saved. And I praise you, Lord God, and I thank you for Stephanie and the blessing that she is and the blessing that she is to become to all the people that she will meet. I pray this in the powerful Islam name of your Son, Jesus Christ.
Stephanie, I heard your testimony. You love Jesus. Baptize you in the water. It's 35 degrees.